Hello FPL managers and welcome to the Fantasy Football Hub predicted lineups for Game Week 7 video with me James, and I'm joined by Benny Boy, Mr. Ben Dinnery, the injury expert both in FPL and outside of that sphere. Ben, how are you doing today?
Very good, James. I'm looking forward to the international break, mate. It feels like it's been a busy block of fixtures. But yeah, get these smashed out of the way and then relax for a couple of days. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I didn't know the word relax was in your vocabulary, Ben. I, I did ask
Ease back.
I did ask Ben before we start recording if he had any plans for the international break, and he said that he was taking a trip to London for work, which pretty much sums it up. I said it's not a trip away if it's still work, but alas.
Listen, any trip out of the house away from the kids is a holiday, regardless of what that entails.
And then Pleasure Beach the weekend after. Can't go wrong.
Oh yes.
Oh, yes. Brilliant. All right. Well, Ben, I know your time is precious. We're recording on a Friday afternoon, as we always try to do when there's a Saturday game week deadline, which there is 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, folks. So make sure you get your teams locked in prior to that. And let this video help you. We're going to go through all of the key, we'll go through every team, but with particular emphasis on those key fitness, injury, starting 11, doubts and concerns and talking points. Ben, you ready to
That
get?
was a mouthful, James.
It was a bit, wasn't it? It wasn't the smoothest in the world. What can I? What can I say? I'm still learning. I'm still learning, Ben. Aren't we all? Right. Okay. Let's. Are you ready? You got a couple more, a bit more
Let's
cheek you
just
want to get
go.
out your system,
Let's
or should
just
we?
go.
We'll just go for it, shall we? Okay, rightio. So we are working from the fantasyfootballhub.co.uk predicted lineups article. You'll find it there every week, updated pretty much in real time as injury news breaks. Ben, I know it's been a busy day with press conferences and whatnot, and it will continue to be busy until tomorrow's deadline. There is, of course, embargoed information coming out later this evening. You know, things in this world change very, very quickly. So do keep your eye on this document. Members get access to the whole thing. Non-members get access to about half of it. Right. Arsenal, Ben. What are we saying?
Looking pretty good, James. Granit Xhaka, the only confirmed injury absentee, looked to have picked up what could have been a fairly serious knee injury during the North London derby. Fortunately, there was no anterior cruciate ligament damage in there, but there was some rupture to the MCL. Hopefully, he won't require surgery, but we're looking at around about 3 months out there for the Arsenal midfielder.
Well, I think considering how Arsenal started the season with both Aubameyang and Lacazette out, if they were going to get an injury to one of their regular starters, you probably would choose Xhaka amongst those. None of their key players injured, which is good news for them. All right, let's move swiftly on then, Ben. Aston Villa. And Watkins are still in there. What a difference to the team he's made, by the way. Since changing to that 5-3-2, they have been a completely different animal. That's something that Bakar has mentioned in his Game Week 7 preview. And it looks like they're able to play that again, Ben, without Buendia.
Yeah, went against the grain last weekend with Wendy. I don't see any real changes. How can you after a win at Old Trafford? The only question mark, I've decided to leave Courtney House in the lineup, but we do see the return of Axel Twanzebe, who was ineligible against his parent club. That would be the only decision for me that Dean Smith would have to make. But look, I'm sticking with the same 11, on the back of that great result.
Yeah, that back line in particular did a fantastic job to keep the likes of Ronaldo at bay. So, as you say, very difficult to change a team that's just performed so well. Brentford becoming more and more popular, particularly for those on their wild card. The likes of Mbuemo finally in vogue. I've been backing him for a while now. He starts, Tony starts by the looks of things. This looks fairly unchanged to me, Ben.
Yeah, same with Thomas Frank. I mean, another good performance against Liverpool 3-3. A little bit suspect in that back line. One question mark, Ethan Pinnock was forced off with a hip problem after scoring his goal against Liverpool. There was no update offered from the Brentford boss, which is highly unusual for him. But what we do know, he has been called up to the Jamaican squad for their upcoming World Cup International. So that suggests that the problem was not severe, and that's why I have left him in that starting 11, and the Bees remain unchanged.
Okay, Brighton. and we saw Veltman with a very, very late assist in game week 6. They're pushing on pretty well, aren't they, Ben? I see Duffy still makes that back line there, and we still don't see any Lamptey in your predicted 11.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about Lamptey returning to this starting 11. However, he's had very limited minutes. I think it's just 45 in the Carabao Cup. And Graham Potter's talked about managing the player after this long-term injury. He didn't feel the game at Selhurst Park was right to be thrown in, and it will be selective. I say that, I don't necessarily see a start in the Premier League. It would be a gradual introduction, building up those minutes, building up those tolerances, and then ultimately before the start. So, we could still be 3 to 4 game weeks away, possibly before Lamptey is in that starting 11.
The once in vogue budget midfielder, Yves Bissouma, makes it back into your starting 11. I think he was omitted last week, wasn't he? What's your reasoning there?
I mean, well, he's key. He's pivotal to that Brighton midfield. And the reason he actually missed out at Palace was through injury, hadn't recovered from a slight knee problem as hoped. Now, again, Graham Potter wasn't able to give any kind of definitive answer. There were still sessions to go, but he was fairly confident. And, if Bissouma is anywhere near fully fit, then he comes straight back into that team without any questions.
That could be helpful for those who have kept him in their sides on the bench. Right, Burnley. And usually we wouldn't spend too much time on Burnley, but they do play Norwich in game week 7. So I think it's only fair we give them a bit of time here because their assets may be more under the magnifying glass than ever before so far this season. What are we saying, Ben? Full bill of health for Dyche's men?
Maxwell Cornet is probably the big one, particularly after his performance last weekend. Scores a great goal. Unfortunately, limps off with a hamstring-related issue. It looks to be too quick of a turnaround. He hasn't been definitively ruled out, but I would suggest that Sean Dyche won't be taking any risks. There is one maybe question mark in attack. I expected maybe Jay Rodriguez to be involved last weekend. He pulled up during training on Friday and was omitted. He's been back on the training pitches. Of course, he scored 4 goals in the Carabao Cup. So maybe he is vying for a place in that front line with Matai Vidra, who's hopefully going to be available after taking a kick to the lower back.
Do you think it would be Wood to make way for Rodriguez if Rodriguez is selected, or is Wood absolutely nailed and it would be a case of either Vidra or Rodriguez there?
I mean, historically, you would always say Chris Wood, particularly on the back of his performances last season, but he hasn't been pulling up any trees this year. Of course, he had a disrupted pre-season following his involvement with New Zealand at the Olympics. I still think it's a big call from Sean Dyche to drop Chris Wood. I see him as the starter and Vidra as the player who would, be the make weight for Rodriguez if he was to come in.
Yeah, Chris Wood, great underlying numbers, but yet to convert those into FPL points. By the way, if you can hear my neighbours next door, I apologise. They are quite loud this afternoon, which is convenient for me. Okay, Chelsea, Ben. And there's a huge amount of discussion at the moment, particularly for those looking to get a Chelsea defender in, about who are the safest picks. The upside of Alonso is tempting, but should we be going for the Rudigers of the world? It's tricky. It's a minefield, some have described it as. You've gone for what I think most FPL managers investing in a defence would want to see in game week 7, which is Alonso starting, and also Christensen, who comes in at just 5 million, a great way into that Chelsea defence, and Rudiger both starting. Why have you gone for Alonso and not Chilwell first and foremost?
I mean, Chilwell is just lacking minutes in that sharpness. So for the reason that Alonso came off, I think it was at half-time midweek in the Champions League. Hopefully that was more with one eye on this weekend's game as opposed to any issues with regards to his actual performance. Chilwell, was away with England. Again, didn't get too many minutes of any involvement at all. So he actually came back from a disrupted pre-season and he's just struggled to regain that sharpness and regain any form. Alonso's been great. And regardless of how Chelsea performed in those last 2 games, let's not forget it's been Manchester City, by the way, and Juventus. Alonso's probably been one of the shining lights for Chelsea. So I don't see any doubt in my mind that Alonso starts in this one.
Well, yeah, his underlying numbers speak for themselves. We've also got a familiar name returning to your predicted 11 in game week 7, and that's Mason Mount. He's been given the all clear, is that correct?
Yeah, Thomas Tuchel actually said if the City game had have been played on the Sunday last weekend, that Mason Mount would have been involved. It was a very minor knock, just a slight issue. It was quite surprising to see him omitted from the matchday squad in Turin. But great news for FPL owners, because that means he's fully refreshed. He has trained and he is available. And like I say, I fully expect him to come straight back into that 11.
It's also potentially good news for Lukaku owners as well, particularly those who are contemplating putting the armband on the Belgian, because Mason Mount is a great provider, and certainly after he went off injured, Lukaku's numbers suffered consequently. A quick word on Reece James as well. What's the latest with him?
So Reece James rehabbing in the pool, done an eye test report, as it were, last weekend. It looked like a mid to high ankle sprain. I always thought the quick turnaround this week was never really in question, and England involvement. When we're looking at those types of injuries, you could be almost doubling what you would typically see for an ankle sprain. So if you're looking maybe 7 to 14 days for a normal ankle sprain, you could be looking up, in the region of maybe 20 to 25 days for a high ankle sprain. Of course, the ones which are more severe would go beyond that. But everything that we've seen at this point, the fact that Reece James actually did continue, following that sort of coming together with Jack Grealish for a little while, and also what Thomas Tuchel said, it's about pain management. I think, maybe game week 8 is realistically, or possibly maybe game week 9 if he doesn't progress as hoped during the international break.
Yeah, those that took the gamble on James, pretty hard done by, in my opinion. And a very quick mention about Kante as well, who was diagnosed with COVID, I believe, earlier this week. You've obviously left him out. He's not going to be ready until after the international break. Ben, do we know whether this, I don't know whether they comment on this sort of thing when it comes to COVID, but is this a case in isolation, or is there any danger that potentially other members of the team could have contracted something from him?
Look, they've been through all the protocol. Players would have been tested both prior to the Juventus game and also ahead of this weekend's fixtures as well. So in terms of Kante testing positive, that's just been an isolated case. Clubs are working within bubbles now, so they're really locked down and to limit the spread of the virus within the squad. So as it stands, unless there's been something which hasn't been disclosed, I'm not really sure when the latest batch of test results will be due. But for now, it's just, that one case with Kante and nobody else.
Rightio, thank you very much. Crystal Palace, and I don't want to spend too long on Crystal Palace. I know that their assets are kind of growing in popularity. We think of Gallagher, Edouard and the like, and both of whom make your side here, Ben. Anything that you would like to add?
Just the potential sort of banana skins with this predicted 11. Milivojevic came in for his first start on Monday night, with Kouyaté making way, and obviously Edouard came in for Benteke. Those are two which potentially could be flip-flopped by Patrick Vieira. However, given the performance and all bar that last couple of minutes, I thought they were great in that first half. So I do think Patrick Vieira will more or less stick with that starting 11 again.
And it is interesting to note that Milivojevic's return does have implications on Conor Gallagher for those that own him. Apparently, they are now sharing set-piece duties, corners, that sort of thing. So Gallagher, still a great asset, but potentially not quite as great as he was prior to Milivojevic's recovery. Okay, Everton, and still, by the looks of things, without Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, Ben.
Yeah, big name, Seamus Coleman, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin, all ruled out, being trained individually this week away from the main group. That had raised hopes and expectations of a return. That was never really likely the case. A couple of potential doubts within this. I do have Jordan Pickford named as the goalkeeper. We haven't had any update from Rafa with regards to the goalkeeper, but he was a surprise returner last weekend after recovering from a shoulder problem. However, after around about 70, 75 minutes, he was actually complaining of that same shoulder issue. And he hasn't been seen on the training pitches this week either. Now, I've left him in there because, again, we've had no official update, and I don't want to read too much into those non-appearance on a training ground. He could be doing strength work in the gym-based activities, but that's maybe one to be aware of. And also, Alex Iwobi, he's picked up a little problem and faces a late fitness test. Now, if he does miss out, then Rafa talked about the possibility of Doucouré playing in an advanced role. He says he's got the energy and the engine. I think he scored twice and had 3 assists this season. There would be a possibility of Demarai Gray going back out to the wing, Doucouré moving up, and the return of JP Gawamin, who's fit for now, possibly back into that starting 11.
Okay, and that could have some quite far-reaching implications for those backing Cristiano Ronaldo and other Man United assets. Firstly, if they're missing Pickford, that could be a huge loss for that Everton back line. And secondly, if Doucouré is in a more advanced role, will they miss out on the defensive rigidity that he provides in that deep-lying midfield position? Interesting to keep an eye out there. Rightio, Leeds, and again, this is another team that is quite highly discussed as far as fitness and predicted 11s goes. You rightly called last week that Raphinha would start, and of course he did. To the surprise of some, I think it was a bit touch and go. It looks, Ben, as though his minutes are still being managed by Bielsa.
Yeah, absolutely. We know there's an ongoing niggling hip complaint involved there. I think last 2 matches we've seen his withdrawal in and around that 70th minute mark. And he actually requested to be replaced last weekend, which was a concern in a way, but also good in the fact that he's managing himself. But what we do know, he's fit, available, and I do expect him to come in. Now, I did get a little bit of flack for my team last weekend and this, that, and the other. I predicted 10 out of the 11. The one that I did miss out was Charlie Cresswell. I didn't think he'd be thrown in such a big game against Mikel Antonio, but the young centre-back had a great performance. He's admitted once again from his starting 11, Pascal Struijk coming in following his suspension. Marcelo Bielsa talked about managing young players from the under-23 squad and giving them the right experiences and the happy experiences and managing all of that. So that's why, again, I've went with a little bit of experience. And I've also shoehorned Raphinha into that number 10 role, which I do see it being a long-term position for him once Dan James gets up to speed and if everybody's fully fit. So maybe for Raphinha owners, that'll be a positive. But again, it's a little bit of a punt because we haven't seen the Brazilian deployed in that position before by Bielsa.
Okay, interesting to see. Then they do have a great game week 7 fixture. So for Raphinha owners, hopefully he can continue to reward them. Bamford, there's no ambiguity over him, is there, Ben? He's very much still out. I think 10 out of 11 for such an injury-stricken team is definitely respectable. So yeah, well played, well played. It's not always easy to predict these teams. Okay, Leicester, and lots of talk about Vardy ahead of game week 7. Some even considering him for a differential wild card shout. He, of course, gets the nod. Interesting to see that you've plumped for Iheanacho and Vardy playing together, Ben. Any other injury doubts that we need to consider for Leicester?
I think the one possibility that could change things up ever so slightly in this one would be Johnny Evans. Obviously, he missed out midweek through illness, but he's also managing an ongoing foot condition. There's a possibility if he's fit and Brendan Rodgers does want to start him, he could come into a back 3 with Vestergaard and Soyuncu. Castagna may be pushed up the pitch and he could replace Pereira. There's also question marks, and I do think he'll miss out over Wilfred Ndidi, hamstring, and that's why we've got Tielemans sitting in that sort of deeper lying road in a 3-1-4-2.
Okay, yeah, Tielemans did start in that Thursday night fixture in Europe, but he does seem to be one of those players that's got quite the engine on him. Oh my word, I'm not logged in. Hang on a minute. Let me let me quickly log in so that we can actually access
We go on the road. I mean, we can go straight on to Liverpool.
That way we can actually access the whole of the article. And here we are, Liverpool, just as it starts to get interesting as well. Right, Ben, talk to me.
Yeah, of course, a big talking point this weekend is the absence of Trent Alexander-Arnold. Who exactly will come into that right back slot? I've plumbed for James Milner for now, but you kind of totally rule out the possibility of Nico Williams coming in there also, and Joe Gomez is a possibility. For the more maverick among us who like to punt, Jurgen Klopp talked about a change of formation, and I don't know. There's part of me thinks that maybe Kanate coming into a back three alongside Matip and Van Dijk is a possibility. I've also opted for Roberto Firmino over Diogo Jota, which is a big call, and that's on the back of his 2 goals coming off the bench in the Champions League. So again, that's probably a 50-50 coin toss.
I think the worst case scenario for Jota owners happened in the UCL game, which is that Jota did start, played the majority of minutes, got subbed off having been pretty mediocre, and his replacement scored 2 goals and is now fresh and clearly in form. And it is a big concern for Jota owners. Plenty of managers getting rid of him this week. I probably will be one of them, to be honest with you. I assume he didn't make the Dinnery's differentials, Ben.
No, absolutely not.
No, okie dokie. Right, Manchester City now. And you've got Torres starting, which is definitely buoys me because I also have Torres, who hasn't started the last 2. Didn't start midweek either, though, Ben. So is that your reasoning for including him here?
Yeah, and we're just, I think deploying Raheem Sterling up there hasn't been in the greatest of form. When Pep tends to talk up players during his press conferences, then we tend to see them on the bench, and he's done that with Raheem Sterling. He said he's been great in that striking role, but he's also best down the left-hand side, and yada yada yada. I just think it's you bring Torres back in. It's not ideal, but I think he's the best of a good bunch, and I think the Spaniard deserves it to be handed a recall in this one.
We also see that KDB and Foden very much options again now for Guardiola. How do you think they're going to be managed in terms of minutes? Is this going to be similar to what we saw last season, where if De Bruyne is fit, he will almost certainly play? How do you imagine Foden is going to integrate into that team as well, Ben?
I mean, it's very difficult to drop Kevin De Bruyne first and foremost, especially for these showpiece games in the Premier League. It's a top of the table clash. So he'll want to be involved. So for me, for the big games, regardless, I think Kevin De Bruyne starts. With Foden, I still think he has a lot of potential to fulfill. He was a player that I expected to kick on a lot in the absence of David Silva. It hasn't quite come to fruition yet. There's a lot of competition in and around that squad. Undoubted quality, but he's certainly not up there with regards to De Bruyne in terms of a guaranteed start, more or less, and maybe even a Jack Grealish. That spot's still up for grabs, and he will come in and out, and he'll probably continue to frustrate fantasy managers.
Sure thing, yeah. What else would we expect from Man City? Cancelo, Diaz in there as well. I know that they're popular wildcard options, and Grealish as well, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ben, hasn't missed a Premier League game yet, which is going some for a Man City attacker. Manchester United and that front four, looking pretty familiar. The big talking point here, Ben, is Luke Shaw. What's his status at the moment, and why have you decided to include him in that predicted 11?
Sorry, he has been managing an ongoing shoulder problem, but I understand that has been ongoing since the Euros, so it didn't really play a massive part, regardless of what Ollie, how he likes to dress it up. And I still have question marks over his withdrawal last weekend, although it was reported as being illness. I just, controversial. I just didn't think he fancied it against Matty Cash. I think he was getting the old Mike Reid the run around and waved the white flag a little bit, but we'll give him the benefit of doubt in this one. If there are any concerns, Alex Telles could come into that team. I mean, he offers that more attacking option down the left, where Dillon is the more defensive option at a fullback. So if Ollie said that Shaw's been training. He's feeling a lot better. So that gives me hope that he will be in that starting 11. Of the three, he is first choice.
Yeah, we've seen some very pixelated pictures of Shaw in training come out. Although Alex Telles, I mean, if you're going to make a statement, if you're going to make a claim for that role, then there's no better way to do it than scoring what was a beautifully taken goal midweek. If you haven't seen it yet, go on YouTube. It's an absolute belter. Right, Newcastle, very quickly. Wilson's still out. Some Maximum, what a great start to the season he's had, carrying that Newcastle side a little bit. Ben, is there anything that you'd like to talk about here?
Yeah, nothing major. Only that Joe Willock returned last weekend after being ruled out. I hasten to add by Steve Bruce. He is probably playing with a heavily strapped foot, toe injury, and receiving painkilling injections. That is the only sort of rationale I can think of how he featured. But he has trained this week and he will be available, and no doubt he will start at Molineux. Newcastle off the back of probably one of their best performances of the season at Vicarage Road, so they should be unchanged.
Excellent stuff. Norwich City, don't want to spend too much time here at all. They've got Burnley away, which is a pretty good fixture.
Just the absence of Billy Gilmore. I think you touched upon it last week that he wasn't included in this 11. He's actually picked up a knock in training to his foot, missed sessions on Wednesday and Thursday, going to have a late fitness test. But to me, even if he passes, then it's still a place on the bench. I really do like Matthias Norman. He's came off, I think, the last two games, fatigue-related problem, just a little bit of cramp. Talked about just acclimatizing and adapting to the Premier League. So I think, yeah, he's got a couple of assists and he looks like a decent player.
He does indeed. Yeah, potentially one for the Dinnery's differentials. Southampton about to have a fantastic fixture run after their away fixture against Chelsea. So I can't imagine many jumping on them at the moment. At least they'd probably be benching them if they do have Southampton assets. One's keeping out for sure. Aside from Stuart Armstrong, who we discussed last week, Ben, is there anyone else who's notably absent here?
Just Jack Stevens at centre-back, quite a significant, I think it was knee injury, could keep him out for up to 3 months. And that's sort of return of Salisu alongside Bednarek. But other than that, elsewhere, maybe Moussa Janetto could come in on that left-hand side of midfield for Nathan Redmond, and maybe Perot for Walker Peters. But this is the 11 that I'm going to stick with for this week.
Might soon be time to invest in your favourite Ward-Prowse, Ben. I know you're a big fan of him. Okay, Kane came off the bench midweek to score 3 goals. He and Son are top of our points predictor tool at the moment. I've already said they're probably not watching Spurs, though, that predictor tool. However, on paper, plenty of potential in this Spurs side. They're looking pretty healthy just off a quick glance here, Ben.
Yeah, the problem is they played on Thursday night. There was no real post-match updates from Nuno, and we've had nothing on Friday so far. This is a team that I probably will look to tinker with. Romero out for maybe Ali. There's also question marks with regards to Skip, and I'm not 100% settled on this formation. I'm not really sure what to do with Dele Alli either. Of course, he came off in the North London derby at half-time. That hurt, and he wasn't great on Thursday night in that conference game either. And of course, on the right hand side, it would be a toss-up between Emerson and Tanganga. So I will, like I say, I'll spend a little bit of time on this one, and maybe I will tweak this lineup a little bit.
Okay, well, keep your eyes peeled, Hub members, for that. Watford and Ismail Assar, by far the most popular option here, but the other fringe options we see, King, Dennis, also both in Ben's predicted 11. I mean, at the moment they're doing all right, so why would you tinker with it? Femenia also in. Inexplicably, you get asked about him quite frequently, don't you, Ben?
I do.
But potentially the biggest talking point, for me at least, now that we know that Sarr is fit, is between the sticks again. Bachmann still out for game week 7.
Bachmann, so he's just actually been past fit.
Okay.
Again, so there was question marks with regards to, did he have a knee injury? Did he not? Munoz said he didn't, and he opted for experience. Then it came out he did. what we do know is he's trained fully this week. But for me, like I say, I think Ben Foster just keeps that place in that starting 11. And of course, I've got Josh King leading the front line. He was my captain last weekend, by the way, against Newcastle. I mean, you talk about a differential, and I mean, he got the assist, but you talk about it was nearly a big payday until that goal was choked off for his big toe being just marginally offside.
Wow. I mean, Dinnery's differentials do live up to their name. You must have been relieved, though, Ben, after that Ronaldo blank. Fair play to you. I mean, Josh King outscoring Ronaldo in game week 6, and you'd captain King, so I love it.
But I had Oba as me. Originally, it was Oba was my captain, and then I went against him, and obviously he outscored him as well. So
yeah,
there's a lot to be said there.
Must have been a good game week for you last game week.
All right. I mean, the rest were garbage, but
yeah. okay. All right, West Ham, Ben, and things are looking fairly predictable as far as this predicted 11 goes.
Yeah, the two concerns are two slight injury doubts, Soufal and Fredericks. David Moyes is fairly confident that Soufal can recover. This is a lingering hangover from the Nemanja Matic coming together knee incident in I think it was a Carabao Cup. He played last weekend, managed that problem, but he's rested on Thursday night against Rapid Vienna. And Ryan Fredericks a little bit more severe. It's a groin strain. Moyes couldn't commit, but to me, it's a little bit of a risk, and he'd probably leave that until after the international break.
Rightio. Finally, we get to Wolves, and this is already ominous. I'm a Traore owner, Ben, so his omission from the Game Week 6 team was painful to me, not least because he came on for 1 point as well, and you have omitted him from your Game Week 7 predicted lineup too.
Look, it's hard to go. We talked about messing with a winning team. They've got a decent result there down at St Mary's. I was a little bit surprised to see Traore drop myself. I thought Trincao was the one, although Podence had been playing quite well when he came on and obviously got the goal. I think it was in the Carabao Cup, and that merited, a place in that starting 11. So I don't really see Bruno Lage messing with that team too much. Of course, we've got Den Donker in there ahead of Neves as well, which is another big call. But like I say, for me, the 3 points talk, and so that's why I'm sticking with this 11.
Yeah, it's a big concern, not least because for Traore owners, the goal was actually scored right as he was about to come on. And, the fact that the goal was scored then and Traore was almost brought on as a way of just kind of stretching the opponent's legs rather than offering any real goal threat is slightly worrying. Pretty much all of my team is currently on the chopping block, so we'll see. We'll see how Game Week 7 goes. Right, Ben, thank you so much for your time. And for talking us through every single Premier League team. Guys, like I always say, this document will be updated prior to the deadline, so do go and check it out. If you go to the Game Week 7 Ultimate Guide on fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, you'll see it right at the top there. Ben, thank you. Good luck to the Dinnery's differentials ahead of the international break, and I hope that you manage to have at least some time to yourself over the next few weeks. We will be returning ahead of Game Week 8. I'm actually going on a holiday, but I'll be back. I actually booked my flight early, Ben, just so me and you could get our chat in on Friday. So Fantastic. I will be back. I'll be back for that. Take care, mate. Thanks for joining me. Cheers for watching, guys.
Pleasure, mate.
See you soon.